Good morning, everybody, and thanks for dialing in today. And Patrick, thanks so much for your presentation there. I've been working on the project now for about 12 months, and I know just how much work has gone into preparing the framework documents, the training documents, and a special thanks, I suppose, to Donald Daly for all the work he's putting behind the scenes. The science is really amazing behind this project. Speaking about science, there's a book on our screens there. It's an educational book for national school children. And I first came across this book about 7 years ago when I was working in the rural water sector. It's a book all about water, and it's very much a scientific based book for children to educate them on where the water comes from and how it gets to the tap. And I suppose the similarities between the framework documents that Patrick spoke about, that Donald's produced, that everybody has fed into, a lot of people that are listening here today, they're very, very scientific based books. For people working on group water schemes, they're gold dust, they're really, really important. They tell us a good place to start, and everything is based on science. I suppose I'm at the implementation stage now of this project. I suppose it's my job to facilitate, to bring people together, to try and get the recommendations carried out that are in the book. And I'm working a lot on the ground with group water scheme managers. And in the picture here is Newell Carroll. He's from the Mid Roscommon Group Water Scheme. You'll hear about other managers that I work with as I go through the presentation. But the first step after we get our source protection plans is literally to get out there and to walk the catchment. And that's what Newell has done down at Mid Roscommon. Here is Ogilvy Springs. And to a lot of people who are in the community, your source is actually where Newell is standing. But a lot of us know here that the wider catchment is really our source and where our water comes from. And in the picture, the guy with the stick is David Nally talking to Newell. And again, we'll hear a little bit about him later on. The first chapters that we spoke about there, the framework documents, the training for the group water scheme managers, the source protection pilot plans, they were all about science. But now what we've moved on to, it's all about people. And I suppose that's one of the challenges that we face. We have to change the scientific to the people. And it can be, I suppose it can be daunting enough at times, but we just have to get the narrative right. We have to make our story now from water to all about people. One of the first steps that we did was we went out and we talked and we listened to farmers. We wanted to try and identify the barriers that they had to implementing some of the source protection measures that we come up with in our source protection plans. A lot of the farmers felt that there was an isolation. You know, they were being blamed for a lot that was happening in rural Ireland. It wasn't coming from ourselves. They thought it was coming from sections of the media, not all sections of the media, but some sections of the media. The farmers also felt that there was a knowledge gap. Not just amongst themselves, but amongst the group water scheme managers going out talking to them. You know, we were asking farmers to go out and to protect their water sources, and they wanted very specifics on how they could do that. None of them wanted to pollute water sources intentionally, but they wanted specifics. They wanted us to tell us exactly what we needed to do. And a lot of the documents that Donald Daly has worked upon, you know, will inform us on them steps. Two of the major worries that they had were worries about delays in farm payments and worries about loss of farm payments. I suppose we're all very interested in water, otherwise we wouldn't be here listening today. If somebody asked us to take 5% or a 10% cut to implement source protection measures in our own gardens, you know, we look at them twice. We all have bills to pay. You know, it's expensive to live out there at the moment, mortgages, childcare, kids going to college. You know, so we have to make things equitable. We can't expect farmers and people in the farming community to be putting their hands in their pockets to protect water sources at a cost to themselves, especially if it's something that they're not doing on purpose. The positive things are farmers wanted to engage, they wanted to get involved, and they wanted clear direction. So I suppose taking all that into consideration, you know, we're taking a two-pronged approach. And we're looking at working with farmers for specific targeted actions, but we're also looking at educating the wider community. Now, we've introduced a Let It Be project, and this, I suppose, does a mixture of both. It helps farmers, but it also educates the wider community. Now, I know it sounds very obvious, but farmers like to farm. They like to produce a product. So what we have done, and we started off in the Corrigan Group Water Scheme, and this has moved on to the Mid Roscommon Group Water Scheme. We've given some families some beehives, some farming families some beehives, with a view to, I suppose, letting the farmers educate the wider community on the dangers that pesticides can do to the local water supply. Because of the fantastic work done over the last number of years on the pollinator plans, bees have become back in, bees are back in the public eye again, and people have a great affinity to bees. You know, it's well proven, well researched, and we've given, I suppose, Thomas Rush on the Curragh Cray Group Wood Scheme, the Kellys and the Durr families beehives, and they're going out and they're talking to the wider communities on what people can do in their area to protect their water sources. And also in the picture there is Ed Payne from Hilltop Dairies. He's on the Mid Roscommon Group Water Scheme. And I suppose if you look at the picture, you can see, or the number of pictures there, one thing that they have in common, everyone is smiling. You know, this is a very, very nice project. It's really bringing people back to nature. One of the first questions that Edward Payne asked me is, you know, what do bees like to eat? His son Ben asked me, you know, what causes them harm? And when we told them pesticides cause them harm, they were surprised. So really what we're trying to do is by educating the farmers, by giving them beehives, and the farmers then going out and creating habitats for the bees on their own farms, it's going to have a knock-on effect with our water. Just to give you a bit more of an overview of this particular project, this is the County Roscommon catchment. The red line is the border of the County Roscommon catchment. The yellow dots on our screen there are locations of our beehives. The yellow circle, is the radius where the bees fly. So what we're telling the farming community and their neighbours are that if you spray pesticides within these radiuses, it will cause damage to the bees. And you know, we think the message is sinking in there. You know, Thomas has said that there's a lot of interest in the project. People can relate to it. You'll see on the right-hand side of the screen there, there's a 3-mile radius that doesn't incorporate much of the catchment, but there are actually lots of farmers living within that area who have land within the catchment, and the distribution network for the group water scheme covers a lot of that area as well. So we felt that it was important that the whole network was covered. There are also 3 swallow holes in that particular catchment area. You can see them there, the 3 blue dots on the screen. And we're currently speaking to 3 farmers about source protection measures along them swallow holes and along them sinking streams. There's about 2,500 meters of fencing required. The 3 farmers have agreed in principle to put in the source protection measures. It's going to be funded by the source protection project. One thing that's holding us up or delaying us is that there's worries and concerns about delays in the gloss payment, not in the single farm payment. That's all been sorted out for the source protection project, and a big thanks to the department for that. But there are worries about, on 2 of the schemes there, that the gloss payment will be delayed or will be reduced, and that's something that we're working very, very closely with the department on, and we're hopeful that because it's a pilot project, we will come up with some kind of solution. I think the important thing here is that the farmers want to work with us. They're identifying the barriers, which is very useful because this is a pilot project, and we're hoping that the findings here can be used more on a national basis as the project goes forward. The project started off, like I mentioned there, Thomas Rush is the real champion of this particular project. On the County Roscommon Group Water Scheme as the Group Water Scheme Manager, he identified a couple of farming families, the Durrs and the Kellys. They were given beehives. We have a mentor coming down to give them training. We're also, because we're aware that bees aren't the only pollinators in the area, we don't want to saturate the community with beehives. We're also looking at producing 330 bee hotels and leaflets to go to the other houses within that community. And again, Thomas, who's a fantastic community person, he really runs with ideas. So you could give Thomas an idea and he'd come back with a better idea a few minutes later, and you'd leave his site, you'd leave his farm, and by the time you got back to Castlebar, you'd be on the phone, you have the projects started. So he's really fantastic, as are the other managers on the schemes that we're working with. But Thomas is speaking to a workshop. He's involved in the HSC, and there's a workshop, people with different kind of learning difficulties. They're going to manufacture the bee hotels for us. We're going to distribute them across the network. Again, it's to raise awareness of actions that people can take within their own gardens to help protect our water sources. You'll see the +2 sign there on our screen as well. Thomas, there last week actually, he sent out a text message to people to tell them about the project, to a very targeted group of farmers, and 2 of them responded back saying that they wanted to get involved. So again, you know, we're letting people come on board. get the beehives, but there has to be something in it for ourselves as well in the premise of a source protection measure. The project then has gone on. It's Hilltop Dairies. Edward Payne and his wife Jennifer and their son Ben have got involved. They're fairly intensive dairy farmers. I think they have about 500 cattle. Not too sure the exact number. Edward's got involved as well. You know, really great to deal with. You know, very honest, open, talking about challenges, but really wants to get involved and to help us. He's actually reduced the amount of nutrients, the amount of slurry that he's spreading around a swallow hole on the scheme. They're taken out altogether for 40 acres. So slurry and ortho-P are massive problems for us across the Mid Roscommon catchment. So having somebody like Edward involved is really helping us to get the word out. And I suppose just to show how successful it was, he posted a few posts on his Facebook page, and the Denali family and the Duffy family saw them and they want to get involved. So it's all about momentum. You know, we'll work with the farmers who are in the catchment just to create awareness, and but more importantly, to target specific scientific measures. We give each of the families a plaque. You'll see one in the photographs later on. And I was actually out there recently with the Duffy family, showing him where to put the plaque outside his gate. One of his neighbours walked along. She was walking her dog, saw the plaque. It was a real talking point, and she has to get involved. She actually owns a bit of land along a river across the road from the Denali family. So it's really by organic growth. We want this to be sustainable. We want it to be really community driven, and that's the way the project is going at the moment. Here are one of the families there, the Denali families. They've actually started, they actually use weed wipers instead of spraying for MCPA. And the reasons that they do this are not to protect the water source, but their reasons are cost, input. It's a lot less chemicals used on the farm. David talks about how he protects the structures of the soil. He wants a targeted approach so it doesn't affect the bees that he has on his farm. And more importantly, the children go out in the fields when he's out there on his farm, and very, very close family, fantastic family to work with. And he doesn't want the children getting these residues on their clothes, on their shoes and on their hands and putting it onto their faces. So, you know, we think this project is all about water, but it's not. We have to make our narrative all about what the farmer wants it to be. Picture in one of the earliest slides that we showed there, one of Noel Carroll's catchment walks there. We have David Nally. There's a bull in the field, so he always carries a stick with him. It's not to go for Noel or anything like that, although Noel was keeping back, whether it's social distancing now or there was a bit of a fear of the stick, I'm not too sure. So there's a water course there behind us, behind Newell, and it's dried up at the moment, but in full flow, it leads directly to Oakland Springs. You know, we've traced it, it goes directly to the spring. And what we spoke to David about was putting a fixed permanent fence along that particular stretch there to stop cattle getting access, and he's agreed to do that. We talked about putting a hedge in place to help capture some kind of nutrients as well that are running off from any fertilizers that are being spread, organic and inorganic. And we were about a half an hour left the field, and David rang up and he said he didn't want to put in a hedge. He wanted to put in a 3-meter border of wild meadow, wildflowers. Again, you know, this is all about David and his family, you know, on his farm. So he wants the measures there. He likes the look of the flowers. He likes the look of the wild meadow. He knows how important they are for his bees, how important they are for pollinators. He also speaks then to us about how important they are for nutrient capture. So again, it's about co-benefits, but the leading factor in this project is about the farmer and having benefits for the farmer, which will lead to co-benefits for us for protecting our water source. We believe that this is the only way that we will get sustainable change across the catchment. It's not all about water, it's all about families. Education was one of the items that was brought up as we spoke to some of the farmers, not just for ourselves, not just for the farms, but for ourselves as well. Noel Carroll, the manager of the Mid Roscommon Group Water Scheme, organised for signs to go up across marts across Roscommon. So there's 3 marts in Roscommon. These signs on good practices and poor practices have gone up across the county. There is also a leaflet which is being held there by Anthony Lee, manager of the Polecats Group Water Scheme. Again, it's similar to Noel Carroll and to Thomas Rush. He's out there all the time trying to push, working a lot of long hours that's often unseen, working to protect their water sources. So, you know, there's 9,000 copies of this going out in this week's Roscommon Herald. to every person across the catchment. And we felt that it was important that this went to every corner of Roscommon, not just group water scheme catchments, because a lot of our catchments are outside the distribution network of group water schemes. And plus in Roscommon as well, you have a significant part of the Loch Forbes catchment in Longford. And we want people as well. This is I suppose a joint initiative. Everybody, we hope, will win from this. In the picture below, I just want to mention him as well. It's Niall Geraghty in Roscommon County Council. Niall has been a tremendous help to myself in this project. He's currently putting together the tender documents for the 3 swallow holes that I spoke about in one of the previous slides. He's very, very well respected by all the group water scheme managers, and it's helped to open a lot of doors to myself. So Niall, just a big thanks to yourself and to Catherine Finlay as well. On Monday of this week, we did an outside radio broadcast. Again, this was to raise awareness. One of the things that was brought up in the conversations with the farmers was the blame game. You know, farmers felt that they were being isolated, that they were being targeted. And this is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to achieve down here. We're trying to go in, we're trying to work with the farming community. The things that the measures that we're putting in place, we want them to have benefits for the farmers, plus benefits for our water sources as well. Mary Claire Greeley, Shannon's side, she spent an hour talking all about water in Roscommon. And we had a lot of the farmers in the initiative were on the air. Kieran Kenny, again from ASAP, himself and Mary Roach are a really great help to myself and to the farmers within the catchment. You know, I don't have a farming background myself. You know, my dad was a farmer. I don't have a farming background. But Kieran has just been an unbelievable help, as have the other ASAP advisors as well. And again, this was about raising awareness of what we're trying to achieve. You know, people have lots of things on their mind at the moment, and protecting water sources isn't a priority. But if the water isn't there in your tap, then it does become a priority. So we wanted to make everybody aware that everybody has a role to play. In the bottom left-hand corner there, we have Noel Carroll and Catherine Finlay from Roscommon County Council, two massive drivers within this project at a local level. And again, you know, without the work of Catherine and Noel, you know, this project wouldn't be where it is at the moment, which is really starting to take legs. The final initiative that I'm going to speak about is a real community-based initiative, and I think this project has great potential, not just to be rolled out across Roscommon, but to be rolled across on a national basis. The message is really, really simple. It's aimed at national school children. I've planted a tree and my garden is pesticide free. We wanted to do 2 things with this particular initiative. We wanted to make people aware that what happens in their own garden can affect their water source. But also we wanted to show the farming community that it's not just about the farmers, it's about everyone that has a role. In the photograph here, we have Sean Mulrine, Ballymore Properties. Sean is extremely well known across County Roscommon. He sponsors the senior GAA football team. He's here with his 3 generations, his son James and his granddaughter Ruby. And Sean is a massive advocate of trees, not necessarily for protecting water sources, but for climate action. He's recently planted about 3,000 trees on his own farm, and Sean got behind us. He's actually sponsored 7,500 trees through a charity called Variety Island, who are all about educating children as well. So that Sean has sponsored through Ballymore Properties and Variety 7,500 trees, one for every national school child across County Roscommon. And this really brings in the overall integrated catchment management approach. You know, it's everybody has a part to play, and it's fantastic to see such a leader like Sean, who is highly respected in Roscommon, coming on board to roll out the initiative that Noel Carroll initially rolled out to 2 national schools in County Roscommon, Tulse National School and 4 Mile House National School. I have a short video that we're going to show. I'm going to pass you over to Joe. He's going to show you the video, which explains a little bit about the initiative. Like I said, that's the end of my presentation now. It's a joint approach. It's about educating the wider community and specific measures, mainly in the farming community, with benefits for the farmer and the co-benefits for ourselves are protecting your water sources. Thanks very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the presentations.